Welcome to Module 2 of the International Certificate in Financial Services Risk Management. Module 2 looks at the practice of risk management in financial services. The aim of the module is to explore the impact of the business environment on financial services firms and therefore on their risk management practices. It examines issues relevant to both banks and insurers and the needs and demands of various stakeholder groups, for example rating agencies or regulators, as well as the bank or insurer's own internal stakeholders. We look at how that might influence corporate governance practice, how it might influence things like risk appetite and their wider risk management practices. We also learn at the end of the course, in the final module, about the lessons from the financial crisis and a number of other important case studies that we feel are important to understand the role of financial services risk management. So what are the module learning outcomes for this module? Well, first of all, we want you to be able to discuss the impact of the wider business environment on a bank or insurer. We want you to be able to describe how that might impact their risk management approach, the way they go about doing things in their day-to-day risk management practices. We want you to be able to talk about the impact that will then have on their risk management framework and the component parts within their risk management framework. We want you to be able to link the regulation and what the bank or insurer might do. Within that, as the lessons of the financial crisis show us, we feel that culture is an important component, and so we want you to understand the role of culture within a risk management context, and we want you to understand how that might drive risk appetites and behaviours around risk management. We want you to look at corporate governance models within the banking and insurance sectors, and we want you to understand the role of the Chief Risk Officer and how that's developing over time and how the regulation is developing that role or pushing that role further and further into the organisations. We want you to think about the three lines of defence model of corporate governance, and we want you to think about the broader aspects of internal control. How does risk interact with internal audit? Last of all, we want you to spend some time looking at some key case studies that we feel provide important messages around the role of risk management, but more importantly, how risk management might go wrong. Key within this, of course, is reading around the 2008 financial crisis. So what does Module 2 look like? Well, as with Module 1, we've structured this in a way that we think leads you logically through the subject material. We start off looking at the global business environment. We want to understand how that impacts on banks and insurers, and the issues it raises for risk management within financial services and the wider sector. Key within that external environment, of course, is the emerging regulatory environment and regulatory trends. Having considered that, we then look at the risk management framework and move on to look at the three lines of defence model within that framework. Anyone working in risk management within the financial services environment will hear discussion of the three lines of defence, and we think it's a worthy topic of investigation. Having looked at risk strategy in the framework, Unit 3 then moves on to look in a little more detail around the key topics of risk culture, risk appetite and tolerance. We think it's important to spend some time examining organisational culture and articulating what we mean by risk appetite and thinking about how culture and risk appetite can be linked together. We then look in Unit 4 a little more around corporate governance, and we dive into a little more detail around the role of the risk management function and the emerging role of the Chief Risk Officer and some of the regulations that are helping our thinking around the role of the Chief Risk Officer. Unit 5 moves on to look at risk assurance and in particular the links between audit and the risk function, before then moving into the final unit where we look at some lessons from real-life case studies. These include, of course, the financial crisis of 2008, which no course looking at financial services risk management can ignore.